morning, everybody. Apologies, you won't be able to reply. I think everyone's automatically set to mute. Yeah, hopefully we'll just give it another couple more minutes. Thank you all for joining. A thumbs up. That's always nice to see. There is someone out there. Good. We'll just give it one more minute. Good. Can I just get a thumbs up to make sure everyone can see the slides on the screen? Should be a blue slide. Perfect. Thank you very much. All good. Right, this is only half an hour slot. It's a couple of minutes past 10, so we'll make a start. Before we go through the content, I just wanted to advise people we are recording. Your images won't show. Everyone is set to have their cameras off, etc. But if anybody has got any issues with it being recorded, then now's the chance to raise. Just give that 10 seconds. Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah. So without further ado, we'll crack on. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Deacon. I'm a partner at Barker. I've got a couple of colleagues on the call as well, Noor Shamil and Edwin O'Connell. Ed and I work in our energy and sustainability team, and we've been supporting a number of clients over the years around decarbonising school estates. And today we wanted to talk about the Public Sector Low Carbon Skills Fund, which is now in its fifth iteration, and really just give you guys all a bit of a brief, I suppose, on what the fund is, what it's for, what you could potentially bid for, how that bid process works as well. Just before I start, just to kind of give me a bit of a steer on the audience, could I just have a general thumbs up or a wave if you have put in a low carbon skills fund application before? So resounding no. Okay, good. That just helps me. So what I'll do as part of today's session is I'll give you a bit of guidance around the fund and what it's all about. Talk a little bit about the focus of the funding and what you can secure funding to support. Some of the nuts and bolts around the application process, preparation work that can be done ahead of the portal, application portal opening, and then also just link that up with the public sector decarbonisation scheme, which is the associated funding round that deals with the capital projects which Salix also manage. That's due to come out again or be open again in the autumn, and just cover off some next steps. So this is, as I said earlier, is the fifth round. So Public Sector Low Carbon Skills Fund has existed since 2020. Well, actually, the first round opened, I believe, in 2019. And fundamentally, this is 100% grant, but it's highly targeted towards development of strategy, energy audits, and decarbonisation, particularly heat decarbonisation plans for things like low carbon heating, etc. It sits at about £16 million this time round, which is a lot of money, but doesn't go very far. So it'll certainly most likely follow the same as the previous rounds, where it was heavily oversubscribed. Fundamentally, though, the Public Sector Low Carbon Skills Fund and the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme Fund are designed to work together. the Low Carbon Skills Fund will provide you with the necessary funding to start to scope and do feasibilities and design towards moving to a low carbon heating solution within your buildings or in your estates. So this is very much the sort of planning and the design side of things. The Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme Fund, which is entirely separate and is likely to open in the autumn, is where you can bid for part of the capital you may well need to undertake the physical transformational projects on site, which is largely low carbon heating at its core. So the two funds do work side by side. However, even if you're not, you don't feel you're ready to bid for public sector decarbonisation, that does not prevent you from bidding in this round to start to complete energy audits, to produce heat decarbonisation plans, to start to give you the data, the cost information and some of the technical solutions to start to pave the way for your own decarbonisation, whether funded by PSDS or otherwise. So just in terms of why, Salix through central government have taken the decision that the decarbonisation of heat is one of the trickier aspects of decarbonisation. There's a lot that can be done to reduce energy and carbon through things like solar panels, LED lighting, and the like. However, the paybacks on those types of projects are pretty strong. As it stands at the moment, to move from a fossil fuel heating source, so gas boilers most typically, to a low carbon heating solution, most typically air source or ground source heat pump, whilst you're reducing a significant amount of carbon, the cost to do those projects is significantly high. And so PSDS and the Low Carbon Skills Fund have been very much designed to enable some of those projects to go ahead, which perhaps wouldn't be viable if additional top-up funding was available, or wasn't available, should I say. The graphic on screen is hopefully quite useful. What effectively it shows you there is the footprint range of in terms of carbon of different heating technologies, and you can see things like air source and ground source heat pumps are pretty low in terms of their carbon emissions, and gas and particularly oil-fired boilers are typically the biggest chunk of your carbon footprint in terms of the estate and buildings. So this fund is very much targeting gas and oil boilers and starting to make some inroads into getting those out of buildings and putting new low carbon heating in. So in terms of this particular fund around eligibility, it is a public sector fund. I'm assuming most of you guys, given our position in the education sector, are likely to be coming from a public sector schools or academies background. Absolutely, this is the fund that you would be eligible for, whether you're maintained or an academy school. One thing I must stress is each organisation can only put in one application. Now, on the positive side, that means that you could put multiple sites in for one application to bid for investigatory work, energy audits, heat decarbonisation plans, and the like. But if you are, for example, part of a local authority arrangement, then the chances are that the local authority would have to put the application in, and if you're a school associated with that, then you would have to basically piggyback onto their application. So, however, if you represent a multi-academy trust, and I can see a number of you on the call are, then as a multi-academy trust, you can put one application in covering multiple sites and buildings. That's no problem whatsoever. The third thing is around additionality. So if you've already commissioned or completed the work, if it's underway or already completed and paid for, you can't apply for this to cover those previous costs, which is fairly self-explanatory. The outshot of putting an application in, and if it's successful, would be you have to do your studies. So whether that's an energy audit, decarbonisation strategy, or maybe some design work towards low carbon heating, whatever you do has to be done by 31st of March next year, 2025. And then the final point is that the maximum grant value to any one applicant is £1 million. But given the nature of the work that needs to be done, I think you'd be doing well to get anywhere close to £1 million. I think one of the biggest applications we're working on at the moment is about 450,000. So hopefully that won't be a blocker for a number of you. Largely, that grant value is in place for much larger organisations like NHS trusts, who typically have very large, very complicated estates. So just moving on. This year, as was the same in the last round, they've introduced some funding caps. This is largely designed to prevent big applications from large NHS trusts, local authorities, universities and the like sweeping in and hoovering up all the money. So there's a stratified approach where 34% of the fund, the 16 million, will go to applications £100,000 and below. 38 to those between 100 and 500,000, and then 28 to those at £500,000 or up to £1 million. So largely the applications we're working on, majority of them are £100,000 and below, but some creep up into that other bracket. So just a good thing to be aware of. It just, this is Salix adapting their process to suit feedback from previous rounds, and there's certainly been a lot of hoovering up going on in certainly the earlier rounds where large organisations took the money very quickly. So probably one of the most important parts of today, what is the focus of this funding? Well, ultimately, it's to support you as public sector organisations in shaping your strategy and planning ahead for decarbonising your estate, particularly around heat. So that's heating, hot water, space heating typically. Generally, rule of thumb for a typical school, around 85% of their gas or oil consumption will be for heating, 15% for hot water, rough and tough. So what we're really talking about here is replacing existing gas or oil-fired boilers with low carbon heating. However, to do that, you can't simply do that in isolation. We'll need to look at the building fabric. You'll need to look at the impact on electricity availability to your sites by moving from gas to electric. You're also going to have to look at cost. Typically, the cost for running a low carbon heating solution will be significantly more than running it via gas. So a solution at any particular site may have to involve an element of reducing your energy use, which we should all be looking at anyway. So that may involve installing solar panels to mitigate the increasing cost, so generate electricity locally from the roofs to fuel the low carbon heating solution, or it might be, for example, looking at LED or control systems to try and reduce electricity consumption as well. So all of this needs to be looked at in the whole, and that really is what we would say is stage one. So on this particular table, as Salix are calling it, the strategy stage is developing, through building audits and energy audits, developing a heat decarbonisation strategy, which, following our approach, which then mirrors with Salix's requirements, is looking at doing an energy audit to identify the options available for reducing energy and carbon, and also looking at identifying buildings with end-of-life heating systems. So, they're the ones that you're most likely to look to replace sooner rather than later. So the majority of the applications we're working on, both in the past and this round, are for strategy stage. Generally, that's for organisations who perhaps haven't done any energy audits, or perhaps early on in their decarbonisation journey. Really, really valuable data capture there around all the things that you could do to reduce energy and carbon, and also look at heat. So I would anticipate, if you're fairly early on in your journey, then your bid could well be looking at doing a series of energy audits and heat decarbonisation plans for some or all of your sites. Um, the next stage really is where you're perhaps further down the line. You've already identified that perhaps a boiler is end of life and needs replacing. You really want to replace it with a low carbon solution, but the funding's not there to speculatively do a design or feasibility. And therefore, the sort of stage 2 stuff is perhaps where you're slightly further on the journey. You've already identified buildings with end of life heating systems, and you require some funding to do specialist site surveys, do a full, proper feasibility design, etc., and scope that. So for those of you who may well have been involved in some of this already, or already got to grips with your sites from a decarbonisation point of view, that might be good for you. And then thirdly, the design stage. So we've had certainly one bid last year where we'd already done the heat decarbonisation plans for one particular multi-academy trust. They then said, well, actually, we know we're going to replace boilers in these 3 sites, and they bid to the last round on LCSF 4 to undertake detailed design. Those projects are now effectively almost tender ready, which puts them in a strong position to then bid for future capital funding as well. So really, what you go in at is all depending on the level of work you've already done to date. Now, one thing I would say is strategy. You can that there is no restriction on the funding in terms of your sort of heating systems. So if you already have, if you're unaware of whether your boilers have got 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, largely that doesn't matter. You'll need to provide some data, but actually the strategy could be done on any school or building. You're only allowed to bid for feasibility or design stage funding if you can provide evidence of end of life heating systems already, and I'll come on to what that means shortly. So just a bit of a sort of watch out there. So end of life requirements, what does that mean? So inclusion of end of life heating systems, as I mentioned earlier, is a requirement for some of the activities, i.e. the design and then more detailed feasibilities. So really, you would need to provide evidence that your plant has reached the end of its useful life, whether that's through engineers' reports, condition surveys, or age-based information. So, for example, if you've got a boiler which is 10 years old and the manufacturer said you can't get parts for it anymore, that's fine, but you need something in writing to confirm that, and that will be scrutinised as part of the application and could cause an application to fail if you can't provide good enough evidence. However, the point I made earlier, so organisations can still include buildings with non-end-of-life boilers when developing activity in the strategy stage. So you can still bid for that, even if you're either aware or unaware of the age and lifespan of your heating systems. Okay, so what do you need to put an application in? Well, quite a lot of data. If your application is over £100,000, and if you want some guidance on how to work, what your application value might be, then by all means we can talk about that on a case-by-case basis. But this is, I'm not going to go through all this, but I'll put it on screen anyway. This is all the information you're going to need to populate the application form. So a lot of this information hopefully you will have to hand. Certainly the display energy certificates, the DEC stuff that's shown on there. There's a public database for that, so that can be sought if you don't have it. But typically it's fairly basic information, which hopefully you would have anyway around this. There's also a requirement, particularly, and I'll just call this out now, around the ownership of the building. So you need to understand whether it's publicly or privately owned buildings, and also any lease arrangements and how long they last. There will be, you can't bid for work to privately owned buildings unless they're on a long-term lease arrangement to a public sector body, and that lease arrangement would need to be, I believe, in excess of 10 years. So they're not going to invest in buildings that may well fall out of the public estate in less than 10 years. So the application form itself, we're actually just taking a step back. The application is online. The portal opens on the 17th, which is about 2 weeks from now. and it's due to be open for a couple of weeks. That's a big change actually from last time. We've moved away from the sort of fastest finger first, where applications would need to be submitted and they were reviewed on a first come first served basis. That has now gone. There will be a window, the application portal will open. There is an online application form which will need to be completed, and the questions have already been published. I'll come on to that in a minute. But separately, you'll need to work up an actual, there's an Excel document, which is the application form. I've done some screenshots on there just to show. And there are 4 stages of information you need to provide, which is not particularly onerous. And you know, if you want support on those, that's a service we're offering to clients to help them produce the applications. It is a blend of non-technical stuff around governance and controls and information from you as a public sector organisation, coupled with information around the sort of technical solutions, what kind of, you know, what you're actually bidding for, what the reports are going to look like, and some stuff around cost and programme and risk as well. So I must say, I think it's fairly straightforward. It's not a significant departure. We've got a team of 4 people working on this already, who are helping clients, you know, with these applications, providing that sort of mix of technical input from us and local knowledge from the schools and public sector organisations. So in terms of the application form itself, oh, sorry, I'm going to skip back. So my suggestion would be that you start as soon as you can. The application forms are available for download, as is the online portal. There's some links in this slide pack which we'll share afterwards, which you can click on and it will take you to the Salix website, etc. It is a relatively straightforward process. I would anticipate, you know, it would take you sort of half a day to a day to at most to sort of complete the application documents. We're absolutely here to support if you would like to do that. We also have established fee levels for primaries, secondary schools, etc., to be able to put those costs forward. And we have a team of engineers who and surveyors who are very experienced at doing these. We've probably done 650, 700 energy audits and decarbonisation plans since this fund opened, almost entirely with schools and academies as well. So we could definitely help on providing information on cost and programme, etc. So yeah, I think, you know, it certainly is a good fund to get kick-started on your low carbon journey. So just sort of looking forward to the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So that's the capital element of the fund. A lot of the work that I'm describing now by way of energy audits and heat decarbonisation planning will give you the vital data you need to submit these applications, if that is something you've got in mind. And I would say that it is almost, it's not impossible, but it's almost impossible to complete a public sector decarbonisation scheme application for grant funding towards a low carbon heating project without having done either an energy audit or probably more appropriately a heat decarbonisation plan, and that document will be requested as part of that application. So you'll need to submit that, and also you will need to make sure that that report and the feasibility exercise that's done through there will identify the costs, the carbon savings, the energy profile savings, etc. The application itself is highly technical, and without a heat decarbonisation plan, it is pretty impossible to get that done. So what I would say is, if you do have boilers which you're looking at replacing and you are considering replacing them with low carbon options, PSDS could be for you, because it could mean that you could get some additional funding to top up those projects and undertake them in a low carbon manner. But without the technical background and the number crunching, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to put in a compliant application. So the reason I mention that is it is all joined. Skipping past LCSF and going straight to PSDS without that technical data is not really, you know, a wise approach. In terms of what this fund actually provides, well, it will provide you with the marginal cost uplift for low carbon heating. So, for example, if it's going to cost you £100,000 to replace your existing heating system, boiler plant, etc., with new gas, it might cost you £300,000 to do that in a low carbon air source heat pump option. This fund would give you the top up. So you as a public sector organisation would still put in the like for like cost, the 100k. You could then, subject to criteria, potentially get the additional funding to be able to afford or make that project viable to do it low carbon. So I just thought I'd mention that because ultimately, we could do these energy audits and heat decarbonisation plans, and they'll give you some great data to action. But actually, it's also about trying to pave the way for a successful capital application further down the line. Generally, generally speaking, I would definitely look at that if you've got boilers on their last legs. So, just in terms of next steps, as I say, we've got fairly limited time until the application round opens. It will be open for a period, so we're not going to have this big rush of getting all the applications in as soon as the portal opens. They will be assessed on a randomised basis this year. We don't quite know what that means, but it sounds like it'll be all applications will go into a pot, and then they'll get randomly assessed and assigned. So to get there, you'll need to register with Salix. Absolutely, you can't put an application in unless you've registered. So definitely get on and do that if you're looking to bid. You'll then need to agree your bid scope and strategy. So that's largely around selecting which sites you should go for, the part of that will also mean looking at where, for example, if you've got PFI schools or sites, is it worth bidding for those or not? I was on a client call yesterday. Someone mentioned they got a new school, and I said, well, actually, how is that school heated? And they said gas boilers. So just because something is brand new doesn't mean you should eliminate that. But if you want some support or guidance around the particulars of your estate, then by all means, get in touch with us and we can help. Certainly with the application as well, we're offering a service where we're helping clients at our risk, actually, with the view that if the funding is secured for the Low Carbon Skills Fund, we would be given sort of first refusal, I suppose, to help produce those reports and do that work. And it is part of an overall process for us. We don't just do, as a business, don't just do energy audits. Ed and the team are actively delivering large scale renewable programs across the estate already. It's definitely good. I've put some email addresses there. Ed's on the call here, myself, T Deacon, and also Laura Hood, who's coordinating, or any general contacts go through info and they'll get to Nor. So I think that's it. Oh yeah, just some useful links here. Hopefully this will give you some guidance. I'll click on the link anyway. This will take you to the Salix page. As I say, it was announced last week. It's opening on Wednesday the 17th, and the portal will close on the 1st of May. And then once the portal is closed, they'll start the randomised assessment. So a pretty short turnaround, not a huge amount of work to do, but certainly something to consider. Good. So I think we have got a couple of questions. So I would just pick those out. So Cindy, thanks. Would Low Carbon Skills Fund cover CLASP and listed buildings? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's no restriction on the type of building. Obviously, CLASP and listed buildings each plus, would have their own challenges, certainly around things like insulation. Listed buildings on PV can be a challenge, but we know the Church of England, for example, are looking at listed buildings with solar panels on at the moment, as are University of Cambridge, etc. So yeah, no restriction there. That wouldn't be a reason not to bid. Sarah's just asked me to confirm the deadline again, so I've just done that. So yeah, the portal opens on the 17th of April and closes on the 1st of May. Another question from Cindy. If a school or trust gets LCSF grant and work on the plans, do they have to bid this autumn for PSDS, or could you defer to future years? So I'll answer that bit first, because there's a second part to the question. So the short answer is no. And in fact, even if you bid for Low Carbon Skills Fund and get the money to work on the plans, you're not beholden to do anything with those. Obviously, you're strongly encouraged to and take those forward. But no, you might do heat decarbonisation for a building where there are no life expired boilers at this point, but there are lots of other things you could do to reduce energy and carbon. So yeah, it might be that site doesn't result in a PSDS application at all for the next few years, and that's perfectly fine. Second part to that question, do you know if it will be offered again for low carbon heating in 2025? We don't know that for certain, but there's been a Low Carbon Skills Fund round every year for the last 4 years, so we would hope there would be. And yes, Nora, I believe you're going to circulate the slides. Is that right?
Yes, I will be. After the session, I'll circulate the slides and a recording as well.
Cool, thanks. Couple more questions. Appreciate we're running slightly over, but I'm keen to cover these. So if a school has previously won LCSF grant, can they apply again? Short answer is yes, but it depends on what they had the grant money for in the first instance. So effectively, if you've already had funding to do an energy audit or in previous years, you can't then bid for that again. However, if you're proposing to do an energy audit and develop that into a full heat decarbonisation plan, then as long as you can demonstrate why you need the extra money, then that's fine. And likewise, if you've done the strategy bit and you want to move to feasibility and design, then yes, you can put a second application in for the same sites. Hopefully that answers the question. Finally, what evidence would you need to declare boiler end of life? Ours are over 10 years, but being serviced presently. So yeah, I mean, generally the cutoff is 10 to 15 years. You would, at the very least, need a photograph of the boiler plate. Normally there's a date stamp on that, which tells you exactly how old that is. So if you are looking to, if you've got boilers which you believe are end of life, then that's fine. If they're working, then you might even just write to the manufacturer, and they might tell you whether they're going to continue to support parts for that particular boiler, or indeed what the design life was for that. But again, happy to discuss on a case-by-case basis. Our engineers have got lots of experience around this, but generally speaking, if you can demonstrate that a boiler is over 10 years old, then the chances are it's going to need to be replaced in the next possibly sort of 3 to 5 years anyway, which is perfectly acceptable for this round. Good. Okie doke. If anyone else has got any more questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll call that a day, and we'll get the slides and information out shortly. If anybody wants any support around the application or wants to talk about some more specifics, then by all means do get in touch with myself or through the contact details that are on here, or indeed our website. Good. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Apologies, we've run a few minutes over. I'll take the blame for that one, but hope you have a great time off over Easter. Thank you.